We're having such a party backstage. Barbara just challenged me to give my pitch that I did in 2006. So you ready for that? No, I'd love to. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. This is a time to pay it forward, to see the new fellows who are coming in. I work in situations of genocide and mass atrocity, and the story that changed my life is not a pleasant one, just to warn you. After the Rwandan genocide, similar massacres started happening in the Congo when Congo's president said that ethnic Tutsis in the country are the enemy and need to be hunted down and imprisoned and killed. At that time, soldiers captured a 13-year-old lanky boy and with his uncle and aunt and 5 cousins imprisoned them. His uncle was killed quickly, then his aunt was killed, and then he watched as his 3-month-old cousin died of malnutrition. People across the country were caught up in that kind of violence. The US government launched a series of rescue missions to evacuate survivors of these massacres. And on the last mission, the Congolese regime held back 112 people without giving any reason. But the US pressured the government to let those 112 people go, and they acquiesced. My boss, at this time I was working in Nairobi, called me into his office and handed me a list of 112 people. He said, I want you to go in to the Congo. I'm sending my right-hand person with you. You two will go in and evacuate these people. The only way you will succeed in doing this is if you do not include anybody else on this list. The Congolese regime has already approved these people for departure, and if you try to include others, they'll try to put additional people on the evacuation, and then at the last minute, they'll hold your people back, and you won't get anybody out, and those people will die there. So no matter what you do, stick to the list. When we arrived in this guarded safe haven where these survivors had gathered, we found the 112 people there, but in the interim 2 months between the last mission and our arrival, more people had arrived. And the person who was working there said, you have to go into that tent over there and see a group of 32 widows and orphans who just came in. You have to take them out with you. Now, I didn't want to go. I told my partner, we can't take anybody else out, but she convinced me to walk in. And I remember stepping into that tent. It was kind of like time went into slow motion for a moment. It was hot. I felt the sweat trickling down my back, and it was impossibly quiet for a 20 by 20 tent that was full of children. But the people in there were emaciated. They had these hollow stares, and none of them were smiling or laughing or talking. It looked like they weren't there. There was nothing there behind their eyes. I went up to this 13-year-old lanky boy who was standing there, and I said, what's your name? And he didn't respond, but a younger boy holding his hand looked at me and said, his name is Daniel, but he doesn't talk. Daniel had been brutalized so badly that he had stopped talking, and later when a doctor saw an x-ray of his legs, the doctor said, was he in some terrible car crash? But actually he had just been tortured very badly. We faced this urgent moral dilemma. Do we try to include these 32 people on our list and risk everyone's lives, or do we leave them there in order to get out the people we know we can get out? I had no idea what to do. I don't know what you would do. I thought, what will happen after this? Can I live with myself if we leave these people here and they die? No. But can I live with myself if we try to get them out and we fail to get everybody out and they all die? No. So we called our boss and we said, this is the situation. We think we have to try to get these people out. And he was very angry. He said, don't do it. I promise you, you will fail. This has happened before. It won't work. Don't do it. We agonized over it all night, but we decided we had to try. And on the tarmac in the airport in Kinshasa, as our buses came in and our plane was standing there, guards stopped those 32 orphans and widows, and time stood still for a moment again, and ticked and ticked until the guards let them go. And we evacuated all of them, and those people came to the U.S. through the U.S. government resettlement program. Now, the great problem that I came head-to-head with working across Africa was not only that many refugees are in life-threatening situations, but that refugee situations go on indefinitely. Today, the average amount of time that someone is a refugee is 17 years. Some people are refugees for 30, 40, or 50 years. They are stuck in refugee camps. Many now flee to urban slums because they don't want to be stuck forever in refugee camps. And you know, unresolved refugee crises can destabilize regions and lead to transgenerational poverty and conflict. Beyond the moral imperative to help, the peace and security and economic implications are devastating for our global society. So with Refuge Point, we set about to expand lasting solutions, starting with resettlement, because the process of resettling refugees to the U.S. and the 27 other countries in the world that receive refugees is dramatically underutilized. In the past decade, I saw that 200,000 resettlement slots had gone unfilled. But even more dramatically, most refugees in most places have no access to lasting solutions, so they are stuck indefinitely. I didn't know where to turn for support, and Echoing Green was the first to support us. In fact, many of you here tonight were among the first to support us. And we were introduced to this extraordinary community here. And we grew and grew and grew. And because of Echoing Green's stewardship and guidance, we started receiving other awards. Everything that has happened to us since Echoing Green, I attribute back to my time here, because I constantly called on the brilliant minds of the people working in this organization for advice and guidance. What do we do when we're applying to Draper Richards Kaplan? They said, this is what you do. And Echoing Green has been a cornerstone and a foundation of all of our success. So thank you, thank you, thank you. That boy Daniel, who couldn't talk and couldn't walk well when I met him, when he arrived in the US, he started talking and he started walking, and then he started running, and then he became a 5-time national college running champion, and then he started inspirational speaking, and then he went to graduate school, and now he's coaching track in college and getting a master's in psychology. That's the kind of impact that this work can have. And Refuge Point went from working in a couple of countries to working in many countries. And because our efforts include trying to galvanize governments and the UN and NGOs to collaborate together, we've helped over 30,000 people to date find new lives in new countries. So what's next? Thank you. That's what Josh Mailman challenged me on. Well, what happens when you fill all these slots? What's next? Here's what's next. We want to see that refugees everywhere, starting with those in life-threatening jeopardy, have access to lasting solutions. That if they can't go home, then their host country can give them the ability to live there and have the same human rights as people who live there, and that resettlement can help those who have no other access. We want to, but you know, most refugees have no access to these lasting solutions, and we want to see people have access so they can move from despair to dignity. To get there, what we have conceived of now is to create minimum standards in our field, kind of like the Millennium Development Goals, an aspirational target, so that every year as a global community, we can commit to helping at least a small percentage of refugees in every country in the world find a lasting solution. We want to have this idea of minimum standards be a rallying cry that can harness NGOs, governments, and the humanitarian development institutions of the world together in a common aim with measurable and quantifiable results so we can move forward and change this space. This can happen, and it has to happen. The thing I love about Echoing Green is that Refuge Point is just one of so many organizations in the space that Echoing Green has supported. Since its inception, Echoing Green has funded nearly 150 social entrepreneurs working in civil and human rights, nearly a quarter of our overall fellowship portfolio. These innovators have launched organizations that have gone on to impact communities in more than 54 countries on 5 continents. Recognized organizations supported by Echo and Green include Disability Rights International, International Bridges to Justice, Earth Rights International, and all those you see on the screen behind me. These organizations are supporting some of the world's most vulnerable populations, from exonerees in Louisiana to prisoners in Pakistan, from gay Muslims and their allies in Muslim communities to Iraqi refugees, and from girls in Africa's largest slum to homeless youth right here in New York City. They are transforming and even saving lives through their daily work. Beyond impacting individual lives in a big way, these organizations are transforming the systems and practices that uphold human rights around the world, from restoring broken justice systems here and abroad to rewriting international law and redefining immigration law. These individuals have envisioned a world where every human life is protected, and they're implementing new systems every day to see this world come to fruition. So it is my great honor to introduce 4 of our finalists. These are people whose unique DNA and experience have combined to bring them to this moment. These are people who are so passionate about their vision that they often go sleepless at night, excited with the possibility of what they see. So here's Sarah, Cole, Leslie, David, and Ryan. Welcome, welcome, welcome.